Hello and welcome back to the Marvelous Snapper, where we have the biggest sunspot energy. We aim to make portrait style video for free-to-play players of Marvel Snap. But everyone is welcome. And today we're back, firstly, to give you a quick OTA balance update brief. And then maybe in a separate video just after this, we'll do a little bit of gameplay, just doing our dailies, and hopefully we can try to find a new card. I've got some news in terms of, maybe I'll talk a bit later about this, but let's just go through the update first. So May 11th, balance updates 2023. Another week, another OTA balance patch. In addition to 4 new card updates, we have some location frequency updates this week. Let's get right into it. First card is Drax, an old card read 4 cost 5 power. On reveal, if your opponent played a card here this turn, plus 3 power. The new version of the card now has 1 additional power, so 4 costs 6 power. And instead of gaining plus 3 power, it now only gains plus 2 power on reveal. The Guardians can create some of the most exciting gameplay in Snap with their predictive playstyle. While they've been doing better with the release of Nebula, they're still performing poorly overall at the moment. Out of all the Guardians, Drax stood out to us as the clearest buff candidate. Compared to other cards like Rockslide and White Queen with good stats and a guaranteed upside, Drax had below average stats for a very inconsistent upside. We're giving him a small buff by moving some of his power from his ability to his base stats to improve his baseline performance. It's very interesting. They've obviously done a very delicate balance because they don't want him to be Shang-Chiable. Because if he gained let's say an additional 3 power instead of 2, he would be a 4 cost 9 power, which would put him in line with Warpath, or would make him able to be Shang-Chi'd. Warpath is also another card that has a condition that's fairly difficult to meet, playing in only 2 of the 3 lanes. But this is, yeah, both of these cards probably aren't particularly good per se. They're not particularly good on their own, and they sort of have to be built around, obviously with Nebula being quite strong. But I don't think this will greatly increase any change of, frequency of play of this particular card, Drax. Yeah. And the whole Guardians thing sort of falls apart if you don't really have Nebula, right? I think a good shell for this kind of thing is like the lane control with Professor X Storm, that kind of thing, because you can more easily predict where your opponent is going to play. I don't think this will be a very impactful change personally, but we'll see how things go. I very rarely see Drax being played anyway. Rockslide, the old card, a 4 cost 6 power card with an on reveal ability. Shuffle 2 rocks into your opponent's deck. The new card is the same, except it's 1 power reduced, so it's now 4 cost 5 power. Rockslide's viability took a leap forward with the release of Darkhawk and Zabu, so it's easy to look at this nerf and assume that we're targeting Darkhawk by weakening one of his support cards. And sure, you'd be right. Darkhawk has been one of the 10 winningest cards in the game since release and featured in multiple strong decks. In fact, Rockslide often mirrors or improves upon Darkhawk's stats, as they're both in the top performing Dino Hawk deck. Since Rockslide's easier to adjust, we're making this tweak with the aim of weakening that deck slightly. I don't think this is a huge change, to be honest. I mean, I think the main problem is being able to get him out earlier. I mean, Darkhawk, with the cost reduction with Zabu, for example, or Sarah, means that you can play a couple of pretty big cards on turns, like pretty early on. Like you could, let's say, on turn 6 with the Sarah out, you can Darkhawk and Mystique it, for example, or you could get the Darkhawk out on turn 3 with the Zabu. So I think that's the major thing. They've already nerfed Zabu and Darkhawk previously, so I think it's still a very powerful card and a very powerful effect that the rocks and the Darkhawk package present, even in the absence of Devil Dino. I don't think this will mean people play him less, just 1 power reduction from Rock Slide. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think I would prefer Rock Slide to have a higher stat line and something about the Darkhawk Zabu sort of package overall be nerfed, because alone Rock Slide itself isn't a particularly powerful card, and people are really only playing Rock Slide in the context of Darkhawk. Alright, Enchantress, the old card, a 4-cost 6-power card with an on-reveal ability. Remove the abilities from all ongoing cards at this location. And the new card has just 1 power reduced. If you recall, not long ago, this was a 4-cost 4-power card that was recently increased to 4-cost 6-power, and now they've sort of brought it down into an intermediate level of 4-cost 5-power. Enchantress has grown in popularity since our buff to her 2 weeks ago, which was expected. While we're excited by how much she's affecting the meta, she's becoming one of the most played cards in the game, which is a bit over a mark. We're optimistic that a small nerf to 4-cost 5-power will put her in a good position going forward. But hey, it was fun while it lasted. I think this is a very reasonable change. It's good to see that the development team's happy to dial back changes that, hit over the mark. I think this was particularly brutal for decks that were dependent on ongoing effects. So things like Devil Dino and Darkhawk particularly. As a person who used Patriot to climb, it was pretty brutal at times. And then I did try playing my pool 2 deck, the Spectrum ongoing list that once you get enough cards sort of can become either Thanos ongoing or Destroyer lists. And I think it would be particularly brutal to play that particular deck with the frequency with which Enchantress was being played. Again, being a 4-cost card, it benefits greatly from being in a Zabu Sarah shell, which I particularly find a bit problematic. Not Enchantress in particular, but that Zabu Sarah shell. I find it pretty difficult to overcome if I don't have that full collection of cards myself. Yeah, it's pretty oppressive. Like, they can just play, let's say if they've got Zabu and Sarah out, then they can play 4-cost cards on turn 12, which is immense value. So anyways, I think this is pretty reasonable. This does make it that Darkhawk and the Dino package has less opposition, but I think a lot of other decks were just being affected as well by this change. Things like Cerebro, Patriot ongoing lists, Wong going lists, things like that. Venom, old. A 3-cost 1-power card. On reveal, destroy your other cards at this location. Add their power to this card. The new card is the same, but 2 more power. So now 3-cost 3 power. Venom has been the worst destroy enabler for a while now, averaging lower power in destroy decks than his peers Deathlock and Carnage. While he's seen fringe usage in decks with Taskmaster, we haven't seen any of them really take off. We'd like to give one of Marvel's most iconic anti-heroes space to shine. So we're feeding him a hearty +2 power buff. Interesting. I really don't see Venom played. I think mostly, I mean, there are pure destroy decks, which I think I've faced once or twice, but I think mostly he's sort of a combo piece in like Arnim Zola, things like that. Yeah, so I mean, I think that's reasonable. That probably needs to be readjusted again in the future. It's a pretty powerful effect, but I think some of the other enablers need to be there as well. I think it's not just the change to Venom that needs to happen in order to make him a more viable card. I mean, the most powerful, I guess, destroy enabler is probably Galactus. And then you've got the standard Galactus, you've got Nimrod Galactus, and then I guess you got the backup plan of Destroyer. I'm not sure how well Venom fits into that particular picture. And then you have the sort of Death Null kind of deck lists as well. So I think he could fit fairly reasonably in that. But other cards such as Nimrod could probably also use a little bit of love, since Nimrod very rarely sees a lot of play either. And then it would be good to be able to use Venom, Nimrod, and Destroyer, let's say, in the same deck. Bonus OTA. Location, location, location. As our library of location increases, we'll be making ongoing adjustments to hit the sweet spot we'd like to for dynamic games. To that end, we're reducing the appearance weights on a few of our existing locations, which means they'll show up less frequently in your games. It's unlikely you'll consciously observe these changes, but we thought you'd like to know. These are Adelan, Krakoa, Lechugulia, Morag, Plunder Castle, Sanctorum, and Subterranea. So Adelan is the one that shuffles your hand and allows you to draw 3 new cards. That's an interesting one. I think most people don't like it, but it gives you some play if your hand is pretty bad and you need to find a key piece. When I was playing Patriot, it wasn't particularly bad, but I know a lot of other decks need particular cards in a particular order, and that can be particularly bad for them. Krakoa is the one that takes over your turn 5 and plays your cards for you. This is a bit frustrating, as this can really determine the outcome of your game. Let's say let's say you're a Sarah deck and turn 5 you don't play Sarah, that could really be detrimental to your game plan, or it plays a bad card. Let's say I'm playing a discard deck and it doesn't play down MODOK, it plays down the Swarms or something else, and it can be pretty bad. So I don't think most people like that one. The other one I really don't like is the Mindscape, where it swaps your turn 6 hand with the opponent. There's a lot of games that are really dependent on turn 6, so I wish they also reduced the frequency of that, but they did not. Lechugulia and Subterranea are locations that shuffle rocks into your deck. One of them I think is shuffle 5 rocks, and then one of them is shuffle 1 rock into your deck after you play a card there. It would have been interesting for that particular one. Let's say if you had the Donald Duck card out, you could see the top card of your deck. It would be good to be able to shuffle away that card if you didn't like it. I think that would have been fairly interesting. But Subterranea just getting 5 rocks, I think this is sort of an attempt to reduce the dominance of the Darkhawk card and reduce its power. So I think that's an interesting balance mechanic, but also I would like to know, the actual numbers for each of the locations. That would be very interesting to know. Morag, I don't remember on the top of my head. I think it's the one where you can't play your first card here. Let me just quickly look that up. Morag. Yeah, you can't play your first card here each turn. That is pretty bad for most decks. So decks that play multiple cards in a turn, like Hitmonkey decks, Sarah Zabu decks, Stature Miles Morales decks. Good. Also, decks that play cards that can go wide, like any Doctor Doom decks. Myself playing Patriot, where I can fit it up with Debris and Ultron, things like that. So yeah, I mean that may be a nod to also the Darkhawk deck as well, but or just Sarah Zabu decks in general, but yeah, I don't think most people are a fan of that location. Plunder Castle. I don't remember what that one was on the top of my head. Only cards that cost 6 can be played here. Again, that's sort of the same restriction as Morag. I mean, a lot of players are looking to play cards that have their costs reduced and have multiple players on turn 6. So that's interesting. Okay. Sanctorum is the one where you can't play cards there, which I personally liked as a Patriot player, but of course it's very restrictive and a lot of decks just can't do anything in that particular location. So I like that they're reducing non-games, and I like that they're reducing the power of Darkhawk. However, I would like to know the odds of each of the locations showing up, and then we can design decks that perform well in most of the locations, you know. But yeah, good to see that they're reducing the oppressiveness of some of these locations. That's all for now. Thanks for stopping by. This is the second to last week of our OTA trial period, with a full-size patch coming next week and the final OTA coming on the 25th of May. While we're not yet set on a plan going forward, we know that we want to continue doing regular OTA balance updates, just at longer intervals between changes. We'll let you know when we have more to share. I think if you're not a player who keeps up to date all the time, then these changes can become lost to you, and you might not be aware of all the changes that have taken forth, you know, especially if you've taken a break from the game or you're studying for exams, you don't play a game for a week or something like that, then it can seem like a lot is happening. So changing the updates to not weekly but second weekly or something like that, I think is fairly reasonable. And I mean, it makes you feel like they put a bit more thought into each of the changes. Unless something is extremely oppressive or something like that, I don't mind waiting a little bit longer for the changes. But the fact that they are doing this means that they're very actively participating and engaging with not only the community, but also ensuring that the game survives and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm pleased that this update has been released and that they're addressing some of the problems, such as the dominance of decks using Darkhawk. And I guess we'll see you there on the battlefield. That's all for today. Thanks, guys. And I'll make another video today with some gameplay. Catch you next time.